My fiancé won a $10 million lottery, dumped me overnight, but he had no idea what was coming. I thought we were planning forever until the numbers hit. The convenience store's fluorescent lights buzzed overhead as Nathan scratched his 5-day stubble and squinted at the lottery ticket machine. I remember the exact moment. His faded blue hoodie with his stretched-out cuffs, his hair a bit too long over his ears, and that crooked smile that had made me fall for him 3 years ago. "Come on, Ellie. It's just $5, he said, fishing around in his pocket for loose change. Someone's gotta win eventually. I rolled my eyes but smiled. This was our Friday night ritual. Cheap wine from the discount store, frozen pizza, and Nathan's insistence that a $5 lottery ticket was our investment strategy. It was silly, but it was ours. Fine, I laughed, handing him a 5. But when we're billionaires, I expect a proper ring to replace this. I wiggled my finger where a modest vintage engagement ring sat, his grandmother's, resized to fit me. We'd been engaged for 11 months, saving for a small wedding at the park where we'd first met. That night, we curled up on our secondhand couch, the springs digging into my back as we sipped wine from mismatched mugs. The lottery ticket sat forgotten on our coffee table while we scrolled through apartment listings we couldn't afford. This one has a nursery, I pointed out, showing him a 2-bedroom that was just barely within our future budget. Nathan kissed my temple. Planning ahead, huh? Always, I replied, resting my head on his shoulder. One day. We fell asleep tangled together on that lumpy couch, the TV murmuring in the background. Just another Friday for a couple of 20-somethings building a life penny by penny. Simple. Imperfect. Ours. How was I supposed to know it would be our last normal night together? Saturday morning, I woke to find Nathan hunched over his laptop, frantically checking numbers. I thought something was wrong with our bank account. It wouldn't have been the first time we'd cut it close to zero. Babe, I mumbled, rubbing sleep from my eyes. Everything okay? He didn't answer, just stared at the screen, his face blank with shock. Nathan, you're scaring me. When he finally looked up, his expression was unreadable. Not joy. Not excitement. Something else. Like he'd just discovered a door in our apartment that had never been there before. I won, he said, his voice flat. Won what? The lottery. $10 million. I laughed. Very funny. Coffee before jokes, please. But he didn't laugh back. Instead, he turned the laptop toward me. There it was. Last night's numbers matched perfectly with our ticket. My first response wasn't what you might expect. I didn't scream or jump up and down. Instead, I felt a strange chill crawl up my spine. I'd always heard that money changes people, but I never thought it would change us. We're rich, I whispered, the words feeling foreign in my mouth. Nathan corrected me immediately. I'm rich. My ticket. He said it with a half smile, but something in his eyes had already shifted. I laughed it off as shock. Of course, he didn't mean it that way. We were engaged. We were a team. This was our breakthrough, our chance to stop struggling. The first few days were a blur of meetings with lawyers, financial advisors, and lottery officials. Nathan insisted on going alone to most of them. It's boring paperwork stuff, he'd say. No need for both of us to waste the day. I tried to ignore the warning bells. I busied myself looking at houses we could finally afford, researching wedding venues that weren't city parks, imagining the life we'd always talked about but never thought possible. But Nathan was changing day by day. He stayed out later, took calls in the bathroom with the shower running. His friends, people I barely knew, suddenly appeared for dinner plans that didn't include me. 6 days after the win, I found a brochure for Dubai on our bed. What's this? I asked when he came home that night, smelling of expensive cologne I'd never bought him. Just some ideas, he said, not meeting my eyes. He'd started wearing designer clothes that made him look like a stranger. I thought I'd take a trip, clear my head. We could both use a vacation. I agreed, trying to sound casual. When should I pack? The silence that followed lasted 5 seconds too long. About that, Ellie, he started, and my heart plummeted to my stomach. I knew that tone. It was the same one my father had used when he told me he was leaving for a better opportunity when I was 9. I stood there in our tiny kitchen, the one with the leaky faucet we'd never been able to fix, and waited for him to say the words that were already forming in the air between us. "I think we need to take a break," he said, finally meeting my eyes. "This money, it's opened up a lot of possibilities for me, for my future." "Our future," I corrected, my voice barely above a whisper. "We're engaged, Nathan." He looked at the ring on my finger like it was an artifact from someone else's life. That was before. Things are different now. Different how? Because you have money? Money we were going to use to build our life together. He had the audacity to sigh, as if I were being difficult. "Come on, Ellie. Let's be real. We were together because we were in the same place in life. Now I'm somewhere else." I felt my chest constrict. "Somewhere else? You mean somewhere better? Too good for me now." Instead of denying it, he shrugged. The casual dismissal of 3 years together, of all our plans and promises, hit me harder than any words could have. "I'm leaving tomorrow," he said, pulling a suitcase from our closet, and beginning to pack. "First class to Dubai. I've already transferred rent money to your account. 6 months worth. That should give you time to adjust." "Adjust?" My voice cracked. "You're buying me off?" "I'm being generous," he corrected, folding a shirt I'd never seen before. "Most guys would just leave." I stood frozen as he packed, watching our relationship disintegrate with each item he placed in his suitcase. The Nathan I knew, the one who brought me soup when I was sick, who talked about naming our future children after his favorite scientists, who cried during sad movies, was vanishing before my eyes. "Is there someone else?" I finally asked, though I already knew the answer. His hesitation told me everything. "It's not like that. I just need space to explore what this new life has to offer." Translation: Yes, there is someone else. Someone who fits better with his new millionaire image. I could have screamed. I could have thrown things. I could have reminded him of every promise he'd made. Instead, I felt a strange calm settle over me as I realized that the man I loved had never really existed. Or worse, he had, but disappeared the moment wealth touched his life. "I hope it's worth it," I said quietly, slipping his grandmother's ring off my finger and placing it on the counter between us. He looked relieved, as if he'd expected a scene. "You'll be fine, Ellie. You're resourceful. It's what I always liked about you." Past tense, already relegating me to his history. As he zipped up his suitcase, he offered what he must have thought was comfort. "Think of it this way. At least one of us gets to live the dream we always talked about." I looked around our apartment, at the photos of us hiking, at the mismatched furniture we'd collected piece by piece, at the coffee mug he'd made me for my birthday with clumsy painted hearts, and realized that my dream had never been about money. It had been about him, about us. He left the next morning with a brief, awkward hug and a promise to check in once he was settled. I stood at the window and watched him climb into the waiting luxury car, not a single glance back at the building where we'd shared a life. The moment his car disappeared around the corner, something inside me changed. The tears didn't come. The breakdown I'd expected didn't arrive. Instead, I felt something new and unfamiliar taking root, a cold, clear purpose. Nathan thought he'd won the lottery and upgraded his life by discarding me. But he had no idea what was coming. I didn't beg. I didn't cry. I vanished. 3 days after Nathan left for Dubai, I packed everything I owned into my Honda Civic and drove away without a goodbye note. 6 months of rent money sat untouched in my account, a severance package I refused to accept. I didn't want his guilt money. I wanted something far more valuable: invisibility. While Nathan flooded Instagram with images of infinity pools and champagne flutes, I moved through the world like a ghost. I deactivated all social media, changed my number, and took a leave of absence from my job at the marketing firm. To the outside world, Ellie Parker simply ceased to exist. My first stop was Maggie's apartment in Portland, my college roommate who'd become a corporate attorney. We hadn't spoken in months, but she opened her door at midnight without questions. "He did what?" she said after I explained everything, her face flushing with anger. "That lottery-winning piece of..." I don't want revenge, I interrupted, though the word tasted tempting on my tongue. I just need space to think. But thinking turned to planning as I watched Nathan's social media through a burner account. The new girlfriend appeared by week 3, Vanessa, a model with perfect teeth and connections to Dubai's elite. Nathan's transformation was complete. Designer sunglasses, a Rolex on his wrist, and a perpetual smirk that screamed new money. It's pathetic, Maggie said, scrolling through his photos one night. He's spending that money like it's unlimited. It's not, I replied quietly. 10 million isn't actually that much after taxes, especially at the rate he's burning through it. Maggie gave me a curious look. You've been doing research. I shrugged. I have time on my hands. What I didn't tell her was about the network I'd been quietly building over the years. In college, I'd majored in communications but minored in finance. My first job was at a tech startup where I'd befriended developers and IT specialists. My marketing career had connected me with media professionals and influencers across multiple industries. I'd always been good at relationships, the kind built on genuine connection rather than convenience. One by one, I reached out to old contacts, never mentioning Nathan or my situation. Just catching up, rebuilding bridges, asking for nothing. People remembered me as reliable, discreet, and resourceful, the exact opposite of what Nathan had become. 6 weeks after I disappeared, I rented a small apartment in Seattle under my mother's maiden name and launched a freelance consulting business. My specialty? Crisis management for small businesses, helping companies recover from PR disasters and financial missteps. The irony wasn't lost on me. You're not just moving on, observed Maggie during one of our weekly calls. You're building something. Maybe I am, I admitted. By month 3, I had established a reputation for solving problems discreetly. My client list grew to include tech startups, law firms, and even a minor celebrity dealing with social media backlash. I never advertised. Everything came through word of mouth. People trusted me because I understood how quickly fortunes could change. Meanwhile, Nathan's digital footprint grew more garish by the day. He'd bought into a tech investment firm, purchased a condo in Dubai's most exclusive neighborhood, and was reportedly dating not just Vanessa, but occasionally her model friends as well. The money had transformed him into a caricature of wealth. All flash, no substance. What he didn't know was that I was watching every move, cataloging every contact, noticing every vulnerability. Not out of obsession, but with the cool detachment of someone studying a blueprint. I wasn't planning anything, not consciously. But when my client, a financial analyst with ties to Nathan's new investment firm, casually mentioned irregularities in their hiring practices, something clicked into place. Some guy just bought his way in without any credentials, she said. The partners are annoyed but can't say anything because he brought in capital. That sounds problematic, I replied, keeping my voice neutral, especially if anyone were to look closely at his qualifications. She smiled. It would be a shame if someone did. That night, I sat in my apartment looking at a photo of Nathan and me from last Christmas, the last one I'd kept. We were building a life with nothing but hope and hard work. He'd thrown it away for luxury and status. I didn't hate him anymore. Hate required energy I couldn't spare. Instead, I felt something more dangerous, clarity. Nathan thought he'd escaped consequences by paying me off and disappearing into his new life. He believed I was just a chapter closed, a footnote in his success story. But he was wrong. I wasn't the girl he left behind. I was the silent architect of what was coming. And what was coming would make him wish he'd never bought that ticket. He thought it was bad luck. It was me. The first domino fell 4 months after Nathan's lottery win. I was in my Seattle apartment, sipping coffee and reading the business section of the newspaper when I saw it. A small article about executive reshuffling at Horizon Tech Ventures, the firm where Nathan had bought his way in as a guest investor. The article didn't mention him by name, but the company's statement referenced realigning our investment team to better reflect our core values and expertise requirements. A quick check of their website showed Nathan's smiling face had vanished from their Our Team page. I closed my laptop and smiled. The anonymous tip about his fabricated resume and complete lack of investment experience had found fertile ground. All it had taken was one email from a concerned industry professional to their compliance department, with copies of Nathan's actual work history attached. My phone buzzed with a text from Maggie. "Did you see about HTV? Your boy's in trouble."
"Not my boy anymore," I replied.
"What happened?" "Word is they discovered one of their new investors lied about his background. Board forced him out." Embarrassing. I put my phone down, feeling nothing but a cool satisfaction. This wasn't about revenge, it was about consequences. Nathan had spent his life cutting corners, and now he was learning that money alone couldn't protect him from his own history. 2 weeks later, Nathan posted a subdued update on Instagram, excited to focus on new real estate ventures after mutual parting with HTV. Watch this space. The comments were sympathetic, but I noticed his follower count had dropped. Nothing repels the wealthy like the scent of failure. I tracked his moves through mutual connections. He'd invested heavily in a luxury condo development in Dubai, planning to flip the units for profit. What he didn't know was that I'd gone to college with the sister of someone who worked in the city planning department. Just curious, I'd asked her over coffee during a chance meeting in Seattle, "How stable are those new zoning regulations for foreign investors in Dubai? A client is considering some property there." She'd frowned. "I wouldn't recommend it. My brother says they're implementing surprise changes next quarter. Some developments might be halted for months during review." 3 phone calls and 1 consulting favor later, Nathan's development found itself subject to an extended regulatory review. Construction halted. Investors panicked. Nathan's money sat frozen in architectural drawings and half-built foundations. His Instagram posts became less frequent, the locations less extravagant. I noticed Vanessa appeared in fewer photos, then disappeared entirely. A mutual friend mentioned they'd broken up after Nathan had to cancel a planned yacht cruise around the Greek islands. "Bad luck follows that guy lately," the friend commented. It wasn't luck. It was meticulous planning. The lawsuit was next. A former client from Nathan's days as a small-time financial advisor filed a complaint alleging negligent handling of retirement funds. The claim was small but costly enough to require legal representation. The timing, just as his cash flow tightened, was devastating. I hadn't orchestrated the lawsuit directly, but I'd made sure information about Nathan's newfound wealth reached the disgruntled former client through a carefully structured chain of gossip. Sometimes all you need to do is whisper to the right person. Nathan's social media adopted a defensive tone, dealing with haters and obstacles. Success breeds jealousy. #stay strong, #resilient. The desperate hashtags told me everything I needed to know about his mental state. 6 months after winning the lottery, Nathan posted a photo of himself in a Dubai bar, looking thinner, the designer clothes slightly rumpled. His caption read, "Sometimes life throws you curveballs. Looking forward to new opportunities back in the States." Translation: the money was drying up. The dream was cracking. I tracked his return flight to the US through a contact at the airline. He wasn't flying first class anymore. That night, I called Maggie. "He's coming back," I said. "Things are falling apart faster than I expected." "Are you satisfied?" she asked, her voice cautious. "Is this enough?" I thought about it. The man who discarded me was already experiencing the consequences of his actions. His money was tied up in failing investments. His reputation was tarnished. His glamorous new lifestyle was crumbling. "No," I said finally. "It's not enough." Ellie, Maggie's voice held a warning. "I'm not going to hurt him," I assured her. "But he needs to understand what he threw away, who he threw away." After we hung up, I opened my laptop and began a new phase. Nathan thought he was experiencing a run of bad luck. He had no idea that his world was being systematically dismantled by the woman he'd considered forgettable. The dominoes were just starting to fall, and I had lined up so many more. One by one, his allies became strangers. Nathan's return to the States marked the beginning of his social collapse. He rented a luxury apartment in downtown Seattle, ironically, just 15 blocks from my modest place, and attempted to rebuild his image as a successful entrepreneur despite his recent setbacks. I watched from the shadows as he tried to leverage what remained of his wealth to establish himself in the local social scene. His Instagram showed him at charity galas and exclusive restaurants, always tagging the same group of new friends, wealthy acquaintances who were drawn to his remaining lottery money like moths to a flame. Central to this group was Marcus Harlow, a trust fund heir who had laughed at me one night when Nathan had introduced us at a bar shortly after our breakup. I'd been there picking up takeout, still wearing my work clothes, when I'd spotted them. "Seriously, dude? That's what you were settling for?" Marcus had sneered, loud enough for me to hear. Nathan had laughed along. Now Marcus was Nathan's closest ally, introducing him to Seattle's elite and helping him navigate his dwindling funds through investment opportunities that seemed to benefit Marcus more than Nathan. It was time for Marcus to exit the stage. Through my consulting work, I'd gained a client who sat on the board of the private club where Marcus's family had been members for generations. Over lunch one day, I casually mentioned Marcus's name. "You know him?" my client asked, eyebrows raised. I shrugged. "I've heard things. Nothing concrete." "Like what?" "Just rumors about some gambling debts." "Probably nothing." I changed the subject. 2 days later, I sent an anonymous email to the club's management from a concerned member, detailing Marcus's actual gambling problem, which I'd learned about through an ex-girlfriend of his who had become one of my clients. I attached photos of Marcus entering underground poker games, records of his losses, and evidence of unpaid debts. By the weekend, Marcus had been quietly asked to take a break from club activities. His family, humiliated by the scandal, forced him to enter treatment for his gambling addiction. His final text to Nathan, which I learned about through a mutual contact, read, "Need to go offline for a while. Family stuff. Can't help with that investment right now." Nathan found himself suddenly without his primary social connection. His calls went unreturned. Invitations dried up. The elite circle Marcus had introduced him to closed ranks. Next came the police investigation. I hadn't planned it, but opportunity presented itself when my new friend at the tax office mentioned increased scrutiny of lottery winners. "You wouldn't believe how many try to hide assets or misreport," she said during one of our monthly lunches. "Really? Even with advisors helping them?" I asked. "Especially then. Some advisors suggest creative strategies." I nodded thoughtfully. "I know someone who won recently. Seemed to be spending way more than he reported winning." 3 weeks later, Nathan received notice of a routine review of his lottery winnings and subsequent investments. Nothing serious yet, but enough to require expensive accountants and legal consultations. His Instagram posts became defensive. "When you're successful, they try to tear you down. Hashtag staying strong, hashtag fighting back." But the comments section told a different story. Where once hundreds of admirers had offered congratulations and support, now only a handful of responses appeared. His digital empire was crumbling alongside his real one. The final blow to his social circle came through Vanessa, who had returned to the States after their breakup. Through a series of carefully orchestrated coincidences, I ensured she learned about Nathan's financial troubles just as he was trying to reconcile with her. I heard he blew through half his winnings already, a makeup artist told her during a photo shoot. A makeup artist who happened to be my college friend's sister, planted there with precise information. Vanessa blocked Nathan on all platforms the same day. By month 7 after his lottery win, Nathan's posts had dwindled to occasional defensive statements and vague inspirational quotes. The photos of luxury and excess disappeared, replaced by generic coffee shop shots and sunsets, the universal sign of someone with nothing impressive left to share. I monitored his downfall from a distance, never directly involved but always present through the network I'd built. What had begun as a quest for consequences had evolved into something more complex. I wasn't just dismantling his world. I was watching him realize how hollow it had been all along. The psychological toll became evident when he posted a 3 a.m. rant about enemies working against me and sabotage from jealous people. He was beginning to sense that his misfortunes weren't random, that some invisible hand was guiding his downfall. He was right to be paranoid. I had become the architect of his undoing, the ghost in his machine, the shadow he couldn't quite identify but increasingly feared. And I was far from finished. "Do you think he knows it's you?" Maggie asked during one of our calls. "Not yet," I replied. "But soon he will." What Nathan didn't understand, what he had never understood, was that my value hadn't been in what I could give him, but in what I could take away if crossed. He was learning that lesson now, one painful day at a time. And the hardest lesson was still to come. When he sold his car for lawyer fees, I knew it was time. 9 months after winning the lottery, Nathan Parker was unrecognizable. Not just emotionally or financially, but physically. I glimpsed him once, accidentally, outside a coffee shop in downtown Seattle. His designer clothes had been replaced by worn jeans and an old sweatshirt. The confident swagger was gone, replaced by the hunched shoulders of a man constantly looking over his shoulder. The tax investigation had escalated. Though I hadn't initiated it directly, I'd made sure certain discrepancies in his financial records reached the right eyes. His hasty investments in Dubai, his attempts to move money through shell companies suggested by friends like Marcus, all of it created a paper trail that raised red flags. Nathan wasn't going to prison, but the legal fees were bleeding him dry. According to an assistant at his lawyer's firm, now one of my regular coffee dates, he'd already liquidated most of his remaining assets. He sold his Porsche yesterday. She texted me one Tuesday morning. Showed up to his appointment in an Uber. I felt a twinge of something, not quite sympathy, but recognition. I remembered the man who'd once been excited about a used Toyota we'd planned to buy together. The man who'd calculated monthly payments on a spreadsheet, determined to make our modest dreams work. That man was gone, replaced by someone who'd thrown away everything real for an illusion of wealth that had evaporated in less than a year. His Instagram account went private after he posted a desperate appeal, looking for temporary housing while sorting out some financial situations. Any connections appreciated. Translation: he could no longer afford his luxury apartment. Through my network, I learned he'd moved in with his cousin in Tacoma, sleeping on a pull-out couch and picking up rideshare driving shifts to cover mounting legal costs. The lottery money, what remained after taxes, frivolous spending, failed investments, and legal fees, was tied up in accounts he couldn't access during the investigation. He started a GoFundMe yesterday, Maggie told me during our weekly call. Called it Entrepreneur Facing Unjust Financial Persecution. It's raised $340 so far, mostly from relatives. I pulled up the page and stared at Nathan's desperate plea, the carefully crafted story of bad luck and unfair targeting. No mention of his own choices, his discarded relationships, his reckless spending. "It's time," I said quietly. "Time for what?" Maggie asked, her voice cautious. "Time for him to know." That night, I drove to Tacoma in a rental car. Nathan's cousin lived in a small house in a nondescript neighborhood, a far cry from the luxury condos and exclusive clubs Nathan had flaunted on social media. I wore a baseball cap and sunglasses, though I doubted he'd recognize me if we passed on the street. It had been nearly a year, and we'd both changed so much. I parked down the block and waited until the lights in the house went out. Then I approached the front door and left a simple white envelope addressed to Nathan. No return address, no identifying marks. Inside was a handwritten note in my familiar script. "You dumped me after the lottery." So I made sure the money didn't matter. Beneath it, I'd placed screenshots of emails, text messages, and records, carefully selected to reveal the breadth of my network and the precise timing of each coincidence that had contributed to his downfall. His job loss, the Dubai zoning changes, Marcus's gambling exposure, the tax investigation tips. Not enough to implicate me legally. I'd been too careful for that, but more than enough for him to see the pattern. To understand that his run of bad luck had been orchestrated by the woman he discarded when something shinier caught his attention. At the bottom of the pile was a receipt for a $1 donation I'd made to his GoFundMe campaign that morning. I didn't wait to see his reaction. I didn't need to. The knowledge that he would finally understand, that the fog of confusion would lift and reveal the architect of his downfall, was satisfaction enough. As I drove back to Seattle, I felt a strange lightness. For months, I'd carried the weight of this secret mission, this elaborate web of consequences I'd spun around the man who broke my heart. Now, As the final piece fell into place, I realized the purpose had never been to destroy Nathan. It had been to free myself. His money was gone. His reputation was in tatters. His future uncertain.
But mine?
Mine was just beginning. I pulled into my apartment building's parking lot as the sun began to rise. For the first time in nearly a year, I didn't check Nathan's social media. I didn't text any of my sources for updates on his situation. I didn't plan the next stage of his downfall. Instead, I watched the morning light spread across the Seattle skyline and made a different kind of plan, one that had nothing to do with Nathan Parker or the lottery ticket that had revealed who he truly was. This plan was just for me. He lost everything. I found myself. The first text arrived 3 hours after I left the envelope. "Ellie, is this you? We need to talk. Please." 6 more followed throughout the day, each more desperate than the last. Voice messages piled up. Emails appeared in an account I rarely checked. On social media, Nathan's private account suddenly went public again with a single post. "I've made terrible mistakes. To anyone I've hurt, especially, I'm truly sorry. Please reach out." I read and listened to them all, but responded to none. His words washed over me like rain on a window, visible, audible, but unable to touch me. 2 days later, he appeared outside my office building. Somehow he tracked down where I worked, perhaps through the same mutual connections I'd used against him. He looked haggard, with dark circles under his eyes and clothes that hung loose on his frame. "5 minutes," he pleaded when I emerged. "Just give me 5 minutes." I regarded him coolly.
Why?
"Because I understand now," he said, his voice breaking. "What I threw away. What you did. Everything. And I'm sorry. More sorry than I've ever been for anything." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "The things you did, I deserve them all. But we could start over. I've learned my lesson. The money's gone, but I'm the person I was before again. The person you loved." I studied him, this man who had once been the center of my world. There was sincerity in his eyes, desperation in his stance. Perhaps he even believed what he was saying, that he could return to being the Nathan I had once loved. But that was the fundamental flaw in his thinking. He believed my elaborate revenge had been about getting him back. "I'm not the person I was before," I said quietly. "That woman died the day you decided she wasn't worth keeping when something better came along. Ellie, please. My consulting business is doing well," I continued, as if he hadn't spoken. "I help women rebuild after relationships that diminish them. I show them how to reclaim their power. You taught me that skill, Nathan. It's the one good thing that came from loving you." "I can change," he insisted. "We can try again." "No," I said simply. "We can't. What's broken isn't always worth fixing." I walked past him, ignoring his calls. That evening, I blocked his number, his email, his social media accounts. Not out of anger or fear, but because his chapter in my life was complete. Over the following months, I heard about him occasionally through mutual acquaintances. He'd moved back to his hometown, found a job at an insurance company, started attending therapy. The lottery investigation eventually concluded with a substantial fine, but no criminal charges. Sometimes I wondered if my actions had been too harsh, too calculated. Had I become the villain in our story? But then I'd remember his casual cruelty, the ease with which he'd discarded 3 years of love when something shinier appeared. I didn't regret showing him that actions have consequences. A year after Nathan won the lottery, I expanded my consulting business into a full agency specializing in personal and professional reinvention. Our client list grew to include women emerging from toxic relationships, professionals recovering from career setbacks, and small businesses rebounding from near failure. I never used Nathan's name or our story in my work, but its lessons informed everything I built. People came to me broken and left stronger. They learned what I had learned, that sometimes losing everything you thought you wanted opens the door to everything you actually need. On the anniversary of the day he bought that fateful lottery ticket, I received a small package at my office. Inside was his grandmother's engagement ring, the one I'd left on our kitchen counter the night he told me he was leaving, and a handwritten note. You were right to walk away. Some people win the lottery and lose everything that matters. I hope you're happy wherever you are. I'm trying to be a better man. Thank you for the hardest lesson of my life. I slipped the ring into a desk drawer without reply. Perhaps one day I'd sell it, or maybe transform it into something new, a pendant or earrings that held no trace of its former purpose. For now, it was simply an artifact from a past life, neither treasured nor discarded. That evening, as I walked home to my new apartment overlooking the water, I thought about the strange journey that had led me here. Nathan had believed winning the lottery was his happy ending. He never understood that true fortune isn't found in sudden windfalls or external validation. It's built slowly, choice by choice, from the person you become when life tests who you truly are. He had lost millions but gained a painful wisdom. I had lost a false future but found an authentic self. In the end, I was the one who had truly won the lottery,